All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Oh, thank you, everyone. What a delight to be greeted first of the week by recorded applause. I'll tell you, it warms my heart. Great to have everyone in the mix. Major SCOTUS ruling just handed down within the hour. We're going to discuss it. Also, some serious questions politically when it comes to gerrymandering, redistricting, and the loss of a major political figure. That'll be discussed at the bottom of the hour with Gary Dietrich, everyone. That's right. One of the moments I'm most looking forward to in today's show is associated with our guest who joins in hour two. This is a brilliant graduate of London School of Economics, author, futurist, but his origin story is harrowing. He was raised in the Church of Scientology, but in a way that you haven't heard before. And, you know, I've read Going Clear, the Scientology book, and the revelations associated with it. I've read and seen a lot of interviews. The details of Jamie Mustard's life, unlike anything I've seen or read. So I encourage you in hour two to join us for that. Oddly, even though I speak to you now in 90 seconds or so, can I just at least review the one? Okay, I have one story to review with you. It's the story of the moment, I think. I mean, I think there'd be no disagreement about it. That's the SCOTUS decision. But then I must leave. I've got doctor's appointments stacked up like flights over LAX or SFO, and so really need to hit them all on time. As a result, and I have direct conflicts schedule-wise. So Kim will be here, and Kim will squire you through everything that need be attended to, and Tony will be here as well. Tony. And so there is that. By the way, just on the less serious but also serious, CBS, I guess, or the U.S. Open coverage was intimidated into not showing the booze that accompanied Donald Trump's image on the big screen, and even choreographing Trump's arrival at the U.S. Open, this is just yesterday, such that he could arrive before the crowd, and that way he wouldn't have to enter to the booze. This is how clearly aware of unpopular Donald Trump is, or his people are. And this is not a popular president. This is unpopular DT. So, Kim, I think we'll touch on that along with some other things along the way. So I do want to make way for her, but I also just wanted to mention
The Mark Thompson Show.
And she'll follow up on the fact that the Supreme Court has just ruled that roving patrols for immigration arrests are legal. This is a huge victory for the president and his henchmen, who have a very aggressive, might I say brutal, approach to executing their immigration plan. This largest mass deportation operation in American history. Those are their words. LA and 20 other Southern California municipalities arguing that half the population of the Central District now meet the government's criteria for reasonable suspicion, meaning they can detain people who are speaking Spanish or have brown skin or are working at a car wash or are day laborers at Lowe's or Home Depot. That is all legal under this SCOTUS decision. It was a 6-3 vote. The justices granted an emergency appeal. They lifted an LA judge's order that barred these roving patrols from snatching people off the Southern California streets based on how they look or what language they're speaking or where they work or where they happen to be at that moment. An order from a Los Angeles judge had barred that, but now SCOTUS has said that's legal. Justice Kavanaugh saying that federal law says that immigration officers may briefly detain an individual, quote, for questioning if they have, quote, a reasonable suspicion based on specific articulable facts that the person being questioned is an alien illegally in the United States. Immigration stops based on, this is from the decision, on reasonable suspicion of illegal presence have been an important component of U.S. immigration enforcement for decades across several presidential administrations. Of course, the 3 liberal judges dissented from this. Sotomayor called it yet another grave misuse of our emergency docket. We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. Rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost, I dissent in this decision. So Sotomayor wrote, the government has all but declared that all Latinos, U.S. citizens or not, who work low-wage jobs are fair game to be seized at any time, taken away from work, held until they provide proof of their legal status to the agent's satisfaction. It's just wrong on so many levels. These aren't brief detentions on the part of immigration agents. These are brutal takedowns. These are glorified nightclub bouncers with their night vision and their sunglasses and their masks and no ID. This is huge. It's awful. And it unleashes, I think, what's even worse, if I can suggest that, and that is that these roving patrols begin to expand even the probable cause associated with detention of other kinds as well. I mean, I think that's in the offing. So, sorry to be so heavy to start things, but man, this is a big decision, and I wanted to at least weigh in on it. Kim has more. Gary Dietrich, I'm sure, will comment. It has massive economic implications for California and for the U.S. And it, more importantly, from a humanitarian standpoint, it's awful, just awful. So, Kim will pick up from here, along with the Tony, and as I say, a terrific conversation in hour 2 with our special guest, Jamie Mustard, author and futurist. That's the harrowing story of a life in Scientology and then finally breaking free. And of course, Gary Dietrich, bottom of this hour, who will talk about politics and more. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, boy. This is the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister. I've got Tony along for the ride. And we have something big to talk about today, as Mark just alluded to. Boy, it feels like we're living in a different country in a different time. Show me your papers, Tony. That's all they need to. The one look at you, one look at me, one look at anybody. They don't need proof, ICE. They can just come on in and say, you know, you don't look quite right. Or you don't, I wonder if you're American. Let's see. Let's see. Show me your papers. So I guess we all have to travel around now with our passports or birth certificates or something that, you know, the minute they point the finger at you, you can show that you're legally supposed to be here. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't feel American to me. This does not feel American at all. But here's what happened. As Mark mentions, the Supreme Court has upheld roving patrols for immigration arrests in Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles and 20 other Southern California cities argued that half the population of the Central District now meets the government's criteria for reasonable suspicion. And we know already that U.S. citizens have been snapped up in these immigration raids, right? We've heard people being held for days before they're allowed to present the proof that they're legal citizens or that they're legally allowed to be in America. So they're staying in lockup for days. This is a scary situation. Today, the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Trump administration. They used the emergency session, and they agreed, the Supreme Court, that U.S. immigration agents may stop and detain anyone that they suspect of being in the United States illegally, and they can do it based on whether you work at a car wash or Home Depot. They can, or are standing in the Home Depot parking lot, whatever, right? Are you in the back of a restaurant? Are you in a sewing factory? Like, wherever you are. Are you a dishwasher? Okay, well, you're at risk. Are you speaking Spanish or another language they don't understand? Boom, they can stop you. What color is your skin? Boom, they can stop you. My sympathies at this moment lie with the people that are of Hispanic descent, the people that are speaking Spanish, because they're the first to be targeted here. I'm sure that there are people of Asian descent that are also being targeted. But I'm looking out into the future, and I'm thinking, who's next? Because it's not going to stop with the Spanish-speaking people, do you think? I mean, I guess they could look at me and go, she looks a little too German and Scottish. She's out. I don't know. I just feel like, what's the quote? First they came for me, that whole thing. I think it puts all of us at risk, and it shouldn't not be tolerated. And it wasn't a close vote. Supreme Court goes 6-3 for this emergency appeal, lifting the order of a Los Angeles judge that had barred these types of roving patrols from plucking people off of the streets of Southern California just based on appearance or what language they were speaking or where they work or where they happened to be standing at the time. Justice Kavanaugh had this to say: immigration officers may briefly detain an individual for questioning if they have reasonable suspicion based on specific articulable facts that the person being questioned is an alien illegally in the United States. He said immigration stops based on reasonable suspicion of illegal presence have been an important component of U.S. immigration enforcement for decades across several presidential administrations. One of the dissenting opinions comes from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who says it is yet another grave misuse of our emergency docket. We should not have a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, appears to work a low-wage job, rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost. I dissent, she wrote. She also said the government has all but declared that all Latino citizens, all Latinos, U.S. citizens or not, who work low-wage jobs are fair game to be seized at any time, taken away from work, and held until they provide proof of their legal status to the agent's satisfaction. It feels ugly. It's felt ugly. You've seen the masked ICE agents rounding people up. But this ruling from the Supreme Court is surprising to me because it seems so, again, I'll use the word un-American, unconstitutional, discriminatory. You can't stop someone because they're speaking a different language. Aren't we the melting pot? Aren't we supposed to welcome everyone? Legally, right? Of course. I could walk outside and speak whatever language I know. This doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all. Go into the chat. ICE, says Trevor, intentional cruelty everywhere. Trail Goat calling it disgraceful. Sushi Roll says, what will it take for MAGA Christians to see how anti-Christian Trump is? I've been waiting for that one for a while, Sushi Roll, and I don't see it happening. Linda, I just had one from Linda. The Supreme Court no longer supports democracy or the Constitution, as I comment with deep sadness. It feels sad, doesn't it? And very surprising. I don't know why, because we knew collectively that the Supreme Court is in Trump's back pocket. No, it's why they do the emergency docket. It's why they take these cases all the way to the Supreme Court. They've got an automatic stamp whenever they get there. We knew it. But there are some things that are a bridge too far. There are some things that feel like, nah, they couldn't do that, could they? Really? I mean, in the Constitution, it says we're not able, what? So here we are. I guess carry your papers with you because this is our new reality. It's upsetting, and I feel like it's causing a lot of fear for people. And at least now everyone knows where they stand. If you're illegally here, carry your papers. Otherwise, you could be carted off at any moment. And I hate to say it, but I think it's true. So let's move forward with Trump's visit to the Bible Museum this morning. Did you know that we had a Bible museum? I did not know. We have one in Washington, D.C., dedicated completely to the Bible. So Trump goes to the Bible Museum. Thanks, Tony, for the Bible Museum. Trump goes to the Bible Museum. He says faith is a major part of America's DNA. He talked about religious liberty. You know, he has his Christian task force because he's so holy, even though, you know, he's throwing people with brown skin in the clink. But hey, that's okay. Jesus was a white guy, right? So he goes to the Museum of the Bible and he talks about religious liberty. And he says his administration is defending religious rights and restoring the nation's identity as one nation under God. Wait, what? Again, are we not a melting pot where all religions are okay? At the Bible Museum. But that's not the worst of it, my friends. Because while at the Bible Museum, and Tony, I'm going to need that video, Trump appears to make light of domestic abuse. He's asked about crime rates, and he starts yammering about crime rates. And then he says something about, you know, the crime rate's down 87%. But if a man has a little fight with his wife, they think it's a crime, that, shoots it back up. I can't have 100% crime drop because I guess he doesn't want domestic violence considered a crime. He is a full-on villain. This is a bad guy. Bad guy. Even if you're a macho fellow, even if you're, I don't know, you want to be thought of as, the action hero, the guy who protects good, righteous American values, you would protect women. He isn't that. He's the bad guy in every movie. Go ahead, Tony.
Safe zone city. There's no crime. They said crime's down 87%. I said, no. It's more than 87%. Virtually nothing. And much lesser things that take place in the home they call crime. They'll do anything they can to find something. If a man has a little fight with the wife, they say this was a crime, see? So now I can't claim 100%.
Wait, what? A man has a little fight with his wife? They say it's a crime? You mean when a man backhands his wife? That's a little crime? I'm so sorry that your crime rate can't go down 100% because of domestic violence. Are you for real? Did he just say that? I can't even. And he said it in the Museum of the Bible. I guess that's okay because, the Christian men are in charge. So a little corporal punishment for the spouse is how it works. I can't even. There are some things where he opens his face and I can't. I wonder if they all believe that, if all the Trump staffers believe this, or if he's speaking and the mouth's dropped open backstage and they're like, okay, who's going to write that press release? Or if they're like, no, this is our constituency. This is our base. We want to attract these Christians who believe that it's okay to put your wife in her place. Seriously? Karen says nothing Trump says makes sense. Linda wants to know what happened to protecting women. Copper says the wife, not even his wife, reduced to property. Highest crime rate, writes Rich, is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Don't talk about all the felonies and his crimes, okay? That's it. Randy says, yeah, all the staffers believe it. They're soulless people. The Bible of Trumpism. It's so far out there and so, how do you discount domestic violence in such a way? He's either evil or an idiot or both. That's how it looks to me. Like I said, the bad guy in every movie. So that was his nice visit to the Bible Museum. It's really nice. Over the weekend, though, I think I'm not alone in the fact that I would have booed because Trump went to the US Open. Yeah. And he was repeatedly booed there. Now, some of the clips of the booing don't seem so bad. The first time he appears, the stadium is not full. Everyone has been delayed for security checks because the president of the United States is there. So everyone has to be thoroughly patted down, their bags gone through, whatnot. So it takes people a half hour to an hour extra to get into the Arthur Ashe. Is it the Arthur Ashe Stadium? Arthur Ashe Stadium, right. So he comes out. The first time he's shown on the Jumbotron, there's kind of a smattering of boos, and some people were standing up clapping. I mean, there's a kind of a mix, right? Then the second time he's shown on the Jumbotron, at the end of the first set, there was some loud booing. Go ahead, Tony. Let's hear it. Him on the Jumbotron there. There's that guy clapping. I don't know. I mean, I heard a few boos and some jeers maybe, but it seemed more like crowd background noise to me. You have more, Tony? Oh yeah. I hear the boos. Yeah. So, yeah, lots of booing there at Arthur Ashe Stadium. The U.S. Tennis Association had urged companies broadcasting the match to what appeared to be censor the crowd reaction and not show anybody who might boo or cause any type of disturbance. The match was on ABC and it was also broadcast live streamed on ESPN. Now, Tony is telling me, listen, any type of, and Tony works sports all the time. Go ahead. You tell me what you told me before.
Well, they always don't cut to anyone who's making a distraction during the game. Like, it's like someone runs on the field in baseball and they'll just be like, and the pitch, they just don't even acknowledge that someone might be running in right field. I mean, this is normal for sports, back from the peak in the 70s of streakers, right? And stuff like that. Or that one girl in the 80s used to run out and kiss everyone in baseball games. Remember her? I can't remember her. But they don't anymore. Doesn't exist because MLB wants a clean image, and stuff. So same with NFL, I'm guessing. Tennis the same.
So here's the quote.
Don't go to anyone.
Here's the press release, a quote from the press release that was issued to ABC, ESPN. They said the United States Tennis Association refrain from showcasing any disruptions to what you said or reactions in response to the president's attendance in any capacity. So it seems to me there that it's not just like a protest on the court or whatever, that it's actually they didn't want the boos to be broadcast, but ABC and ESPN did it anyway.
Yep. What are we talking about? Are you talking about who won the final, or are we talking about Trump? And I think that's what they wanted, right. Not to avoid that, I think.
Right. Yeah, no, and you're completely right, because that is the big thing.
The story is Trump again.
It's always Trump. The story's always Trump. Come on now. Yeah, they said we asked all broadcasters to refrain from showcasing any disruptions or reactions in response to the president's attendance in any capacity. And they said they regularly ask broadcasters to refrain from showcasing off-court disruptions. So ESPN didn't comment, ABC didn't comment, but they both aired the boos or whatever.
The camera happened to be on. We didn't do anything else, exactly.
No, they didn't. And it's that type of censorship that Trump said he did not really react to the boos, and he was standing there smiling, like acting like everyone was cheering for him. And afterward he said, the crowd really surprised me, they gave me a positive response. And I was thinking, did you hear what I heard? Because I didn't hear you getting a positive response. Okay, whatever.
Oh, did they go last year as well, I guess?
No, he hasn't been for a long time. He hasn't been since, I think,
2014. Yeah.
2015 or something like that.
Yeah.
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 So it's been a while for him.
Yeah.
He did say that this audience is largely liberal, right?
Oh.
Tennis going
I
audience.
say, if we've learned anything from this, tennis fans are liberal and football fans are obviously
There you go.
right, because they all
Yeah.
cheer, the at least college ones, right?
Come on. Trump also had a big weekend when it came to his meme throwing on Truth Social. He kind of joked around about going to war with Chicago, and that's not funny. If you're living in Chicago, maybe you're a little nervous about that. Can we see the meme, Tony? It's like an Apocalypse Now kind of meme where it's Trump looking all like warlike, yeah, with the helicopters and I don't know, is that Agent Orange in the background? It's some warish thing. I love the smell of deportations in the morning, he said. Chicago about to find out why it's called the Department of War. So over the weekend, Trump signs an executive order changing the Department of Defense's official name into the Department of War. So we no longer have a Department of Defense, we have a Department of War. And then he starts putting memes up about going to war in Chicago with all these choppers. I love the smell of deportations in the morning. And he's looking like I don't know, some type of military outfit. I don't know exactly what military outfit that is.
Oh, it's from Apocalypse Now.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I forget. Oh, what's his name? I'll figure out his name. Yeah.
Because that's not an official military hat that I've ever seen before, but okay. So, yeah, it's a meme based on Apocalypse Now. And so Trump is asked by NBC's reporter, her name is Yamiche Al-Sindor, and now it's Trump and team that has posted this meme, right? So once you put this out there, you have to expect that people are going to ask you about it. If you're the president of the United States, that's a little inflammatory. So Yamiche Al-Sindor asks Trump about his threat to use the military in Chicago. And here's what happened.
Go to war with
That's fake
Chicago?
news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why
I
would
don't
the
go to
Department of
war.
Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second grade.
You ready to move to the second phase of sanctions?
So that's
against
pretty
Russia?
much it. It just goes on from there. But yes, calls her second rate, says she doesn't listen, tells her to be quiet, calls her darling. Be quiet, darling. You're the one that posted the Apocalypse Now meme. He went and called her darling, which, whatever. Okay. And then, so she asks, are you trying to go to war with Chicago? And he says, when you say that, darling, that's fake news. And then she asks a follow-up, and he says, that's when you heard him say, listen, be quiet and listen. You don't listen, you never listen, and that's why you're second rate. Because she asked him about the meme that he posted with helicopters in the background. She writes on X, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has accused President Trump of threatening to go to war with Chicago. So I asked Trump, she said, if he was doing so. And he said that was fake news. And I followed up and asked why he was using the DOD. And he replied, that's not war, that's common sense. He said, we're not going to war. We're going to clean up our city. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense. And then you get this meme with the Apocalypse Now and the phrase Chipocalypse Now at the bottom. And I love deportations in the morning. Yeah.
So Kim, here's the actual from the movie. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's the hat.
Yeah.
What branch of service is that? Do we know? Is that Army?
It was Army, if I remember right. It's been a while since
Okay.
I've seen the movie, but I think it was Army like Rangers or something like that.
Yeah, that was a take on the movie. So he gets a lot of Democratic criticism, criticism from Democrats. And he says he's not going to war with Chicago. He said, we're just not going to war. We're just going to clean up our cities. And the people of Chicago are looking at all this going, we already know they were staging. There was over the weekend, some lawmakers, including Tammy Duckworth, that tried to visit the military base, Great Lakes, and they locked it up and they gave everyone at the base the day off so that there would be nothing for the Democratic lawmakers to see. And one wonders what they are really doing. It's hard for me to fathom the United States actually claiming war against one of its own cities. I would imagine it's kind of a nothing burger. Like in DC, they'll send the National Guard in to pick up trash. But it makes them look really tough, right? We have Gary Dietrich coming up, I should tell you, and a really wonderful conversation after that with Jamie Mustard, who details his life growing up in the Church of Scientology and what happened when he left it. It's a fascinating conversation, and it happens in the second hour after we talk to Gary Dietrich. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about Epstein, because all of these other things seem to have overshadowed this. There's a new patio at the White House. It was the Rose Garden. It had a lush lawn and roses surrounding the lush lawn. And Trump paved it over and put up tables and umbrellas, and he's calling it the Rose Garden Club. And of course, Governor Gavin Newsom keeps coming out with these responses to things Trump does. And on X, from his personal account, Newsom said he's got a new nickname for this place. It's called the Predator Patio. So instead of, Predator, there it is, the Predator Patio. So instead of Trump's Rose Garden Club and something out of Mar-a-Lago, Newsom's now calling it the Predator Patio, which brings me to the Epstein files and the latest going on there. The Epstein estate records are expected to be released this week and could shine a light on the connections that Epstein had. Could show nothing at all. But among the things expected to be released, Epstein's Black Book, his birthday book. Remember the birthday book with all the fun messages in there? That is expected to be released. The Last Will and Testament is expected to come out. The agreements that he signed with federal prosecutors in Florida in 2008. Again, his contacts from his Black Book, which, I mean, could mean something if you're in there and could mean nothing, right? So that's all expected to be delivered to Congress this week from Epstein's estate. And before we get to Gary Dietrich, I do want to play this video of Thomas Massie on the Epstein files. He says, we can't avoid justice to avoid embarrassment for some very powerful men. And I don't know if Tony, if you can bring up that video, but he was, he's on ABC with George Stephanopoulos over the weekend, and he's not backing down from his request and his demands that the Epstein files be made public. He said, again, we just can't avoid this. Here it is.
Anna, thank you both for joining us this morning. Congressman Massie, let me begin with you and get your response to Speaker Johnson right there. He says you've been misled. He also suggested at one point this week, seemed to suggest that President Trump was an informant to the FBI about Jeffrey Epstein. Your reaction?
Well, they haven't been misled, and the Speaker's point that the victim's safety is compromised or privacy is false, because when we asked the survivors at our event, did they support the legislation that Ro Khanna and I have introduced, they all said yes. Now, I don't know if the Speaker misspoke when he said that Donald Trump was an informant. The lawyers for the victim said that Donald Trump had been helpful in 2009 in their case by giving them information, but being an informant implies some formal connection and ongoing relationship with the FBI. I don't know what that's all about. I think the Speaker needs to clarify that. And if it's a hoax, why was Donald Trump an informant to a hoax?
Oh, well,
Congressman
that's a
Connor, the
great
effort to take up
question. Thank you,
Republican
Tony.
signatures
I
appears to
appreciate
have
it. Yeah. Why would he be an informant to a hoax? Now, Speaker Johnson is backing off that claim a little bit about Trump being an informant for the FBI. So I don't think that story is going to go away. We'll do a little more digging on that. But originally, Speaker Johnson said that Trump took the Epstein rumors so seriously that he served as an FBI informant. That's new. First time we've heard that. I am delighted to welcome a former KGO political consultant, now a consultant for the Mark Thompson Show. He's actually iHeart TV and radio political analyst, Gary Dietrich, and we love to have him on the show every week. Welcome, Gary. Oh no, I can't hear your voice. You're quiet. I still can't hear what you're saying. I wonder if you need to turn a microphone on, Tony. I'm not sure why we can't hear Gary.
His mic is on. It just maybe. Yeah.
I don't know why we can't hear you. We can see you. You look amazing, but we just can't hear anything you're saying.
How about now? Try now, Gary. No. Leave and come back real fast. Just leave and come back because I think something got blocked coming in. Okay, just leave and come back.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. All right. We'll welcome Gary
Oh,
back.
I love technology. Isn't it great?
I know. So fun.
Especially with everything train wreck everybody.
He looks good though. I don't know. We have a lot to talk to Gary about. We'll get his opinion on the I guess I'll ask him about the Epstein files and see what he has to say about that. But I also want to talk to him about some other things as well, including the death of former California Congressman John Burton, who has died at the age of 92. To say he was an influential Democrat isn't really telling the whole story. He is responsible for, is the reason we have so many of the current leaders we have today. He kind of had this machine going where he would support and promote these Democrats into other positions of power. So among them, I believe Governor Gavin Newsom. We'll talk to Gary Dietrich about that, about what John Burton meant for California and meant for the Democratic Party. Yeah, there's John Burton. John Burton was a U.S. congressman. He was a California assemblyman. He was the president of the California State Senate. And for years and years, he was the chairman of the California Democratic Party. So he had a huge influence over the Democratic politics in the state of California. The Governor Gavin Newsom is ordering the flags be flown at half-staff in honor of John Burton, who passed away at the age of 92. So a nice long life for him. And Governor Newsom also says he will posthumously induct John Burton into the California Hall of Fame. They were friends. You know, Burton was a mentor to a lot of these up-and-coming politicians that are still around today. So his legacy, his impact, long-lasting when you look at the landscape of politics in California. I know that Gary Dietrich has a lot to say about John Burton and the legacy he leaves behind. So we'll talk to him about that. We'll also talk about the U.S. Treasury Secretary denying Trump's tariffs are attacks on Americans. We all know that we have to pay that, right? I mean, businesses aren't going to pay it. So the cost is always passed on to the lucky consumer. So we'll talk about that as well. And I have some video from Scott Bessent, who says, and interesting, he says the jobs that are being created are jobs for American citizens. Does that mean it's white people jobs? We'll take a listen to that. Let's try Gary Dietrich again. He is the iHeart TV and radio political analyst, Gary Dietrich.
Hey, Kim.
Hey. Good. Thank you for being here, and I can hear your beautiful voice.
Who knows what kind of, Kremlin-inspired gremlins got me? I have no idea. I mean, I do this kind of stuff, as you know, all day, every day, TV side, radio side. Stuff just happens, and it's inexplicable. And of course, you have your little thing on the way in. It says, check your mic, fine, whatever. And it's fine, and then you go on live and you're not working fine.
It happens. But
good to be with you, my friend. Always.
Yeah. Well, usually it's Mark that gets to talk to you, and I remember from the KGO days, no matter what time of day I would call you, you were always good for a quick interview and a quick sound bite, and I've always appreciated that about you.
Well, we endeavor to do our best, my friend.
Yes, you do. I will say that you've been in politics, especially state and local politics, for a very long time. And I know you probably have some thoughts on the passing of John Burton, who died over the weekend at the age of 92. I was talking before you came on about his legacy and how many Democrats he kind of brought up in the political system and how his influence will probably last for a very long time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll hit on three things real quick about Burton, okay? He was, first off, it's important to note that he was brothers with Phil Burton, member of Congress. Why is that significant? Because Phil Burton was brought in by Willie Brown whenever they had to be a redistricting. And now I'm talking about this because this is all the rage in terms of topics, of course. But Phil Burton was seen as the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, drawing districts that would favor Democrats in California. He regularly was brought in to make that happen. And of course, he passed away some time ago, but that's his legacy. Now, as far as John goes, John is credited with several things. One is, there we go. He was contemporaries with the, legendary Willie Brown. They actually entered the assembly in California on the exact same year in 1964, if you can believe that, Kim. That a long time ago. All right. And
so before I was born, for sure.
And so that gives you an idea of his longevity. And he came up with Willie Brown and really put together, for lack of a better terms, the San Francisco Democratic machine, which eventually, of course, is translated into state power when Willie became speaker himself. John Burton served as speaker. He then subsequently, when he was termed out in the California legislature, served as the California Democratic Party's chair. So here's just kind of three you could say, memorable, legendary leave behinds for California. One was starting the careers of people like Willie Brown, helping aid him, and then notably Nancy Pelosi. After John Burton stepped aside, then Nancy Pelosi eventually took the congressional seat in San Francisco that launched her into not just state, but of course, national prominence. That's number one. Secondly, in the state capitol, and I'm not joking about this, people typically avoided John Burton. And why? Because he had quite a temper. He had quite a colorful vocabulary. Let's just put it that way. And if people crossed him, he had no bones, even in public, about dressing them down with plenty of explicatives, and people were well aware of that. And lastly, he really built the Democratic Party in California into a powerhouse. Just one example of that, when he came on as chair, the Republicans and Democrats in California are raising about equal amounts in terms of, their funding for activities as a party. When he left that as Burton, he had doubled that amount relative to Republicans. So he is seen as quite an icon in Democratic circles in California.
Yeah, and I mean, Governor Gavin Newsom has some connections to him as well, right?
Right. Yeah, he did. He does. Willie Brown and Burton kind of mentored him along. Brown gave him his first appointment on some little commission in San Francisco. But it's fair to say that those two, and then eventually Nancy Pelosi, were Newsom's mentors, not to mention Kamala Harris's in San Francisco politics.
That's right. I wanted to talk to you about the U.S. Treasury Secretary over the weekend, and this is the second cut. I have some video for Gary. Tony, if you can play it, the second cut of Scott Bessent, who appeared on NBC's Meet the Press over the weekend and told Kristen Welker that he does not believe that that Trump's tariffs are a tax on Americans, or that Americans will be footing the bill for all of this. He also had some other interesting things to say, but let's start with that. Oh, Tony's still working for it. He dismisses concerns about the president's tariffs, and he says this is all working. They're looking at the current numbers about manufacturing jobs and the jobs that the poor jobs report that came out. And he's trying to spin it all these different ways that, we're going to see manufacturing increase in the United States, and the jobs that are being created are jobs that are not jobs that immigrants will fill. They're jobs that citizens will fill. Um, it's another one of these moments, Gary, where you look at what the numbers say, and then you look at their spin on the numbers, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, here's the deal. You have really two lines of thought, as you know, Kim, about this whole tariff thing / jobs / let's just call it investment in the U.S. All right, and of course, one is the common refrain, and you're kind of echoing that, of look, this is a tax, and many economists will say it's a tax on the consumer, i.e., the American people, and it's eventually going to drive up inflation. It's going to drive down consumer spending. And it could potentially, in their view, have a negative impact on job creation in the U.S. if you have a slowdown, especially in consumer spending, which is the single largest driver of GDP. So that's one school of thought. The other one is, well, listen, with this tariff thing, we're forcing other nations and companies to reinvest in the United States in, as Besant says, the manufacturing sector in particular. What they caution, and what Besant was trying to do over the weekend, was say, look, that doesn't happen overnight, right? He's saying we expect by next year to start seeing some of these factories come online, more jobs be created. And really, it's a focus, Kim, on manufacturing jobs, of course, the traditional blue-collar Midwest especially jobs, as opposed to service sector or hospitality industry jobs, which traditionally, as you know, haven't been unionized or to a much smaller degree and have not paid the kind of wages that manufacturing jobs. Now, which of these storylines is going to win out? We're going to know. I mean, in the next 12 to 24 to 36 months, it's going to be really clear where this ends up.
I think Tony has the video. Let's watch.
I think that was actually held back. The One Big Beautiful Bill, which has full expensing for factories and equipment, was passed on July 4th. Many companies were holding back then. So we are going to see construction jobs, and we're going to see manufacturing jobs.
But Mr. Secretary, the economy did add nearly 500,000 manufacturing jobs under former President Biden. In this case, since April, again, you're actually losing manufacturing jobs. Is that problematic for your policy?
Well, a couple of things, Chris. We're going to get the revisions for last year next week, and there may be as big as an 800,000 job downward revision. Again, this would be the second downward revision, so I'm not sure what these people who collect the data have been doing. It's good. We need good data. Secondly, what we are seeing is the jobs that are being created are going to either native-born or legal Americans. Most of the jobs created under the Biden administration, they went to illegal aliens.
Well,
yeah, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. So that's a little bit of what Besant had to say. And once again, blaming bad numbers, blaming bad data. And I don't know how much water that holds.
Well, I'll tell you, this data problem is becoming a real problem, Kim. I mean, it doesn't matter what your perspective is. It's like anything, right? You're watching a football game. I mean, either the ball is put on the 15-yard line or the 25-yard line, and it can't be both, right? But if you don't have agreement on that, how can either team call a play, right? And I mean, that may be a crude analogy, but that's really the problem right now, is that there's been so much disparity in people's perspectives on that. And as you know, I think one of the things that's most frustrating and angering for Americans is these constant quote unquote revisions of the numbers, up, down, sideways. This has got to get figured out, because right now you don't have any commonly agreed upon set of data that economists, politicians, CEOs, others feel like they can count on to make decisions, let alone Wall Street and investors.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move to redistricting, since I only have you for a few more minutes. We know that California is going to be putting on the next ballot the issue of whether or not the voters want to redistrict to go head to head with Texas's redistricting. But now there's a lot of talk about Utah that they could be the surprise redistricting state. I thought Utah was a red state, but apparently, and they're doing it not to fight back against any type of perceived injustice, but they're redrawing congressional lines because a judge ruled last month that Utah legislators went around safeguards against partisan gerrymandering with their latest lines. And so that led to the Republican control of the 4 congressional seats in Utah. And now the judge says, no, you got to redraw these lines before the midterm elections, which the thinking is could lead to a Democratic seat coming out of Utah.
It might. I mean, and you have the storyline exactly right. So I won't repeat that or go into any more detail about it for today's purposes. But in terms of redistricting, there are 4 congressional seats in Utah. They are currently now all controlled by Republicans. There's thought that if the lines are redrawn and, for example, Salt Lake City is kept more intact, that's the one, as they call it, blue dot in Utah, where there's more Democratic voters. So, and I want to emphasize could, and I think you did too, Kim, Democrats could pick up a seat, but even Democrats in Utah are saying, look, it might at best end up a competitive seat, and maybe we have a shot at it. By the way, similar is happening in Ohio, where the Ohio legislature is being required to redraw their lines as well. And so we'll see what happens there. There, however, Republicans are looking to pick up as many as 1 or even 2 seats. And if you want to run down the other list real fast, you've got Indiana looking potentially, but not with confidence, at redrawing their districts to get 1 more Republican one. In Missouri, it's maybe 1 more seat. And the big one sitting out there now on the Republican side is Florida. Governor DeSantis has said they're probably going to do it, but it's interesting. There's not been a lot of real movement on that practically yet, but there's thoughts that maybe they could pick up 2 or 3 there. Problem for Democrats in places like Illinois, New York, and Maryland is that they've got some constraints and, frankly, many fewer Democratic seats. Republican seats to work with to pick up. So we'll see where this all ends up in the next 60 days or so. And of course, the big kahuna right here in California, where in less than 2 months, that Proposition 50 will be decided on to see if Californians get to vote on new district lines, of course, pushed by Governor Newsom.
It's so up in the air with all of these different states and the politics at play in all of these different states and who's going to redistrict and who isn't going to and what it could all mean. It's you have no idea what's going to happen in the midterms.
Well, that's absolutely right. So anyone tells you with any certainty that they know what's going to happen as a result of all this in next year's midterms, as I like to say, has absolutely no idea what they're talking about, because we don't even know what the district lines are going to be like in up to 10 or 12 states. So this is going to make, Kim, of course, right here in California, potentially $250 million being spent by both sides. People are already seeing all the ads on TV, getting all in their mailbox, but this is going to happen in other states. We won't know, Kim, really and honestly, till probably early next year, what the final lines are going to look like for 435 congressional seats in the United States.
Wow. Speaking of the midterm elections, though, is that the current lines? Is that the proposed lines? Not sure what he's got on there. Interesting. I saw this story about Trump's job ratings, that they're still negative, that Americans are expressing support for vaccines, and that may have something to do with the negativity around RFK Jr. and vaccines and what's happening in Florida. Trump's overall approval sits at 43%. 78% of the respondents at NBC News said they support the use of vaccines. Also, inflation and the cost of living were economic concerns as well. Is it something that Trump has to worry about, this job rating, or if they manage to reconfigure the selection that people have of Congress people, they won't have to worry about job ratings? Is that why they're going so hard on this redistricting, because people are unhappy?
Well, you want to increase your margins any way you can going into midterms, which are historically, of course, it doesn't matter who's the party in power in the White House. As you know, Kim, historically, in the midterms, you lose seats and oftentimes lose control of the House or the Senate. Now, most experts believe, and I'm in this camp, that getting Democrats' chances of getting control of the Senate going to be really tough next year. They don't have many seats to contend. And so that's going to be a tall order. So that's why you hear so much focus on the House. Now, listen, these underwater approval ratings, and when we say underwater, that always means any number below 50%. These are a real concern. And they are for any president going into midterms. Look, here's the deal. You've only had, I was looking at these numbers over the weekend, Kim, in the last 25 years, the last quarter century, you've only had 2 midterms where the presidents avoided losing seats. Okay. And that was a Bush term, George Bush Jr., and an Obama term where they had positive approval ratings, notably George Bush after 9/11. Okay. And so history is not favorable towards presidents, period, in the midterm election. Certainly not if you've got approval ratings under 50%. So there's a long ways to go between now and the fall of next year. As you know, I love to say, look, that's a millennium in politics. Okay. It's only 13 to 14 months to the midterm election date, but that's a long, long time. So many things could happen internationally, domestically, that could really bounce those approval numbers up or down. And it's gonna be a battle royal next year, Kim, no doubt about it. But Trump right now and his people certainly have to be concerned about 43% approval rates. Are they better than Biden's last year going to in the 24 election? Yeah, that's why Biden dropped out. Okay, one of the reasons. But no, they're going to have to focus on this, and there's no doubt concern about it.
Before I let you go, there was a big Supreme Court ruling today regarding the ability of ICE agents to just sweep in and detain people based on their appearance, where they work, where they happen to be standing, what language they're speaking. So I thought as we say goodbye, I'd ask you for your opinion on that as we wrap it up.
Yeah, that's a big deal, of course, because that was the contention down in Los Angeles, as you know, that there was so-called quote unquote profiling rather than having, hard evidence or a warrant, for example, an undocumented person that maybe had committed a crime or had alleged to. So the Supreme Court, as you rightly point out, has said, no, you can use, they don't use the word profiling, of course, but they, criteria to determine at least whether somebody gets questioned. And that's really what this is about, questioning their status. Now, I will simply end with this, Kim. This is a debate that's gone on for a long time in law enforcement in the United States, be it red states or blue states. Can you, for example, pull somebody over, or can you stop somebody on the street based on a certain kind of criteria? This is a debate that's been going on for a long time. And this is one more aspect of that obviously right now potentially opens the door for ICE in a way it wouldn't have had the Supreme Court struck that down.
Gary Dietrich, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure, my friend. Do a better job. Have fun today.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Gary. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Gary Dietrich's report is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're looking to relocate to or from Northern California and you need a highly respected real estate professional, Bill Campbell of Remax Gold, that is the person to call. You can call or text Bill at 530-448-7474. That's 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell of Remax Gold, sponsoring Gary's segment. Thank you, Bill.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
We have a wonderful interview for you today. It is Mark and Jamie Mustard. So Mark left behind this wonderful conversation with Jamie Mustard, who details his life growing up in the Church of Scientology and what it was like trying to get out of Scientology. What happens when you try to leave this cult or church? We'll find out. Mr. Mustard has a new book that details all of this as well, and we'll have a link to that in the show description. But have a listen to this. This is Mark and Jamie Mustard.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody, right on. I'll tell you, I am very excited about this conversation that you're about to see and hear. It involves the Church of Scientology, which has been shrouded in mystery, and now the accounts that have come out of the world of Scientology are excruciatingly real as that cloud has cleared. And perhaps in the excruciatingly real category and leading it is our guest today. He's an accomplished author, and although he had, and you'll hear, no formal education because it's kept away from him and so many others like him, he is incredibly academically and scholastically accomplished, and now has moved on to author research papers and major published works with some of the titans of academia. How about it for the great Jamie Mustard, everyone? And Jamie, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
I'm super intrigued, as everybody is, by the, as I was saying before, the repugnant nature of what we're learning about so many of the stories that come out of this world of Scientology, some of the abuse, some of the brutality, the way that Scientology is turned. Again, this is based on accounts, some of them, quite famous. Going Clear was the book that really became popular, then made into a film. How you're turned on your family if they don't embrace Scientology or if they disavow Scientology. It's a really scary world. But your accounts of your upbringing, which you detail in your latest book, Child X, it's otherworldly, man. And I'm just hoping that we can cover a few of these significant events, and you can give us a texture of what the church was like and what it is like today.
Okay. Well, yeah.
So, Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, first, let's start with your birth, because I feel like right out of the chute, your birth takes you on a wild ride, and none of it's good.
Yeah, I was gonna start with my birth, and I in a context, I was only gonna say that it's been a strange and powerful couple of weeks, because an article about my life as part of the book recently came out in the Daily Mail. And what was so strange about it was they reached out to the local Scientology there for comments on my, quote, allegations. I didn't really think they were allegations. I thought I was just telling the story of my life. And they responded with a declaration from my mother, basically denying my childhood. And so it's been, so let's go to my birth.
In other words, saying it didn't happen, basically.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
And even the things that they said, their admissions are terrifying. There's their admissions, which we'll get into. But to start with my birth, I was born in the 1970s. On the day of my birth, I was handed over to people in naval uniforms, where I was raised by a couple of caretakers in a slum nursery on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles.
And just to jump in, and I promise I won't do this too
much. No, you
but
can all you want.
You were raised, I should say you were birthed in this kind of uptown hospital, I think on LA's west side, and then they scurry over, get you, and then take you to this slum-like thing that you're talking about.
I was born at Westwood Medical Center. So next to near UCLA, posh, a nice part of Los Angeles, which is my hometown. And then I was handed over to people in naval uniforms and whisked away to 811 Beacon Street, not far from MacArthur Park in the Rampart Police District, on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles, where there was maybe one or two caretakers to 30 or 40 babies, where I would sit in my own sick, staring up at the ceiling for the first 2.5 years of my life. Where
it
when
was
I
like an orphanage then, essentially.
Like an orphanage, it was the best way to describe it. And when I did go to play, my playground was they would take us to MacArthur Park, where we would step over needles. Anybody that lives in LA knows what MacArthur Park is, which is, it was back then it was heroin, then it was crack, and now it's fentanyl. And that was the first 2.5 years of my life. And when I first did an interview a couple years ago, because I've been living in shame, I've kind of lived a double life for the last half of my life. I have a lot of humiliation connected to what happened to me, and just my life being so out of control from birth. People have to understand that I was born into the Scientology Inner Navy, the so-called Sea Organization, which is a kind of religious paramilitary group. My mother was a member of that. And the idea was that she needed to be working to save the planet. So all of us kids were kind of going to be penned off over here into what I would only call animalistic conditions. And I mean, there was one caretaker when I first did an interview about 2 years ago, reached out to me, a 7-year-old girl that used to take care of me on Beacon Street in downtown LA. And she said, do you remember how they bathed you? And I said, no. And she said, once a week, they would run a bath for all 30, 40 babies. And they would dip there would be 2 caretakers. One of them would dip you and wipe you, and then hand you to the next caretaker who would put a diaper on you. Then they would dip the next baby in the same water. So I spent the first 2 years of my life basically being dipped in feces. And it's hard to describe the animalistic conditions of my childhood, Mark. I never learned to brush my teeth. I didn't have bedding. I lived on congealed, oily mattresses. When we finally moved to a building on Melrose, which was far worse than what I call the baby factory, I was on the 3rd bunk of a dormitory, a slum dormitory, where I was being raised in a military structure from the age of 3 years old. And I never went to school. So what makes my story so incredible is there was a couple of years we escaped when I was 13, and we went to Oregon, and I was kind of warehousing myself without glasses, getting Fs. But other than that, I was only in school for a few weeks here and there my whole life, or maybe a month here or a couple months there, but pretty much my whole life without academics. At the age of 20, I could not write. I could read at a high level from studying the doctrine, but I couldn't write. I didn't know how to use a comma. I couldn't use a sentence. Couldn't write a sentence.
As I read and hear you describe this life, I thought about sort of the Chinese indoctrination camps, or you hear about this is also true in some very, in Middle Eastern countries, some of them deeply religious, informed by that religiosity, and these kids are put in this indoctrination, again, indoctrination. So you do talk about the fact that they are indoctrinating. That is the business. But so it's an odd sort of indoctrination, because it's so one-dimensional, it seems, and so insanely abusive. It's hard to imagine that kids coming out of that program could embrace it in any way.
I think that you have to, well, I mean, the nature of indoctrination, especially if you're born a baby into it, is you know nothing else. So even though I'm growing up in urban Los Angeles, I'm sequestered into these people. And one of the early forms of indoctrination is I'm taught to look at you as an outworlder a very specific way. So somebody that's not a member of this movement, I'm taught I even at 3 years old, I would have been taught this. Okay, you're known as a wog, which is an old British racial slur for worthy Oriental gentleman. It's a colonial term when you go into a colonial country, what they call the locals, that they would be civilizing. That word is equivalent to the N-word in England today. Scientologists still use it. So I would have I was taught by the time I was 3 or 4, that you were a wog, which is like a muggle, the Walking Dead. So even when I would get exposed to somebody like you, because I am living in urban Los Angeles, I'm looking at you as some sort of bizarre, potentially sinister force that can hurt me.
Even as you return to, as you suggest, this withering situation that you're being raised in terms of the militarism, you can describe some of the brutality. It's just, it's insane. I guess, as you say, if it's all you know, and you know you have to come back to it, you just can fear it and accept it. But, you describe a kind of humiliation that they're inflicting upon you, and a kind of brutality that's unrelenting.
Yeah, I mean, I signed my first billion-year contract with an X when I was 5 years old. at the same age that I believed in the Easter Bunny and the Sandman and the Tooth Fairy. That was one of the things that was presented to Scientology in England about my story that my mother refuted in a declaration. And this is how crazy this is, Mark. She refuted this declaration saying, he's lying. He wasn't 5. He was 7 or 8. And I was there, and it was adorable. This is in the Daily Mail. You could Google my name, Child X, the book, Jamie Mustard, the Daily Mail. This article just came out a week and a half ago, maybe I think a week ago Sunday. And so that's their refutation, is that I still at 7 years old believed in the Sandman, Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and right. So I get, one of the things that people have asked me is, A, why are you here? Why now in your middle age are you talking about this thing that you've been secret? My agents didn't know. My publishers didn't know. I mean, I've been living kind of a secret life in a way because of all this shame and humiliation that I've carried of being that vulnerable. I don't know. It's in my cells because of the physical abuse. But one of the reasons I'm here is because this is a lost generation of children that this happened to, the son of the religious Navy group, the children, the sons and daughters of this religious Navy group on over 40 years on 4 continents. This occurred in Sydney, Australia, Johannesburg, South Africa, Mexico City, Central Florida, urban Los Angeles, Copenhagen, Denmark, and Southern England, including Neil Gaiman, who would have been the first generation, which I can talk about if that's where someplace you want to go. And one of the so I'm here to tell this untold story. People know everything about Scientology. When I go to the media with what's in this book, and I talk about the lost children of Scientology, us kids that grew up in the paramilitary Navy, and they say, what are you talking about? Like this story's never been told, with all the aftermath and all that stuff. So it's one of the reasons I'm here, because I've lost so many friends to drug addiction and suicide, or they're so broken they can't speak for themselves.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you note that, because I see that almost as an inevitable course, given everything that you were up against as a kid. So continue to fill in just a little bit on the specific side, because you do describe, as I say, it's a hellish existence.
Yeah, I mean, we ate slop. There were public beatings. They called them public spankings, but they were public beatings where we were forced to watch other kids get beat. In fact, one of the ways they taught us, you mentioned kind of Chinese indoctrination. Hubbard they taught us through repetition, which they called Chinese school. So they would repeat a doctrine they would say a doctrine to us, and we would repeat it in unison. So some of the okay, well, let me talk about one of the questions that people ask. I'll talk about kind of why it was that way, because I keep getting asked this, and then I'll talk about some of the early indoctrination. One of the questions that people keep asking, and your listeners or your watchers are probably thinking it right now, is why would any group of people go out of their way to treat children so animalistically? Because that is what it was. It was animal-like conditions, no sheets. Again, I'll say it again. I did not learn to brush my teeth. I didn't have underwear. I didn't have bed sheets. We were living in a slum, stacked like sardines in this military environment. And people kind of go, well, it seems like it would be hard work to treat kids like that. Why would you do that if you wanted them to be part of the movement? And the only way I can describe it is the way they think is that production is everything. Work is everything. Hubbard said production is the basis of morale. So your parents are feeding the organization. You're a useless eater. So they really viewed us as the way, say you're Mark Thompson and you're the pig farmer. You're not going to put your pig up in the Ritz-Carlton. You're going to put your piglet in a pig pen for as little resources as possible until it's ready for slaughter 5 or 10 years later. So we were pretty much penned like animals until we could be used for labor starting at 9 to 12 years old.
And what was the kind of labor that kicked in at 9 years old?
At 9 years old, I was used for child labor when we moved to the old hospital. Not long after we moved to the old hospital, which is that big blue building. It was beige back then, that big blue building on Sunset that everybody sees around the world. The first job I ever gave is they had me using this stuff called naval jelly because I was small. They would put me in a hazmat suit and have me use this toxic chemical to clean the air vents of the hospital all day. They'd put me in there in the morning and take me out at night. And I would be scrubbing them with this toxic chemical. Then sometimes they would leave me alone for a year and I would just be lingering in the LA drought. And then, there's something that happened in the book where right around that same time, 9, 10 years old, they had me clearing fiberglass with kitchen gloves. So all day, where my entire body and the inside of my mouth at 8 or 9 would be packed with fiberglass. And then I would go home at night and take these kind of searing baths in the slum, in the tenement, and the needles would float out of me, and then I would do it all again the next day. And that labor changed over the years.
The presence or lack of your mother's presence is an interesting subplot to all of this, because of course it was the first thing. She relinquishes her child. Maybe she does it enthusiastically because she's doing Sea Org stuff or whatever. And then you get to your grandparents. I'd love to get to that moment as well. But just as a pause here, where is your mother through all of this? Through age 9, you're cleaning using these toxins, et cetera. Give us a sense of where your mom is, your interaction or lack of interaction.
Well, different parts. She's in different places at different times. When I'm 3 years old, she's off in Hollywood, working probably at the Chateau Elise, across from Birds and La Poubelle. Okay,
right. That's the celebrity center there.
Yeah, but they used to have where the Garden Pavilion is now. They had an annex that was which was their advanced division, and then became a child care facility. So she was off at that advanced division as a counselor, using their machine to deliver past life counseling. Then she went to train in Florida for a couple of years. And so I was in the dorms after I was in the FBI raid when I was a little kid, which was the largest FBI raid in history. That's
a great story. Tell that story quickly. It's unreal.
I mean, I was a little kid. They woke us up at, it was the largest FBI raid in history, based on the largest domestic spying campaign in U.S. history, where the Scientologists had infiltrated the U.S. government, were spying on them. And it was midnight. They woke us 11 or midnight. They woke us up. They brought us around the building all night as FBI agents swarmed into the hospital.
When you say they, you're talking about the Scientologists did.
Yeah, our Scientologists,
secrete you from FBI, exactly.
Yeah. They were trying to keep us from the agents, but we saw them anyway. And what was so strange about it when I got older is we're living in these horrific conditions. There was a woman who had been framed for bomb threats named Paulette Cooper, who was a baby Holocaust survivor that was exonerated. And it was proved that Scientology had framed her, and she was about to go to federal prison for a decade or more. She was exonerated from that raid, but they didn't care, and they completely ignored the living conditions and the state that us children were in. So, my life was a harrowing. I was like a twig being or a feather or something being twitched on a river, and I lived this incredible life, but it was not by my own choosing. I was being swept down this river. I remember one time, that's in the book, when I was about 8 years old. I hadn't seen my mother in a year and a half, and somebody came over to the dorm on Fountain Avenue, right across from the big blue building where we lived. It's a tenement, and said, we're bringing you to meet your mother. And I was brought almost to an upper floor of the big blue building, into a waiting area with all these card tables and chairs. And there were a couple other kids and other people waiting behind these chairs and card tables. And then my mother came out in black wearing an armband. And it was explained to me that she was in Scientology's hard labor camp, where you could spend anywhere from 3 to 15 years doing hard labor all day, wearing an armband that you would see out of Dachau or, Auschwitz or Birkenau, and for your behavior. And you have to run everywhere all day. I mean, run everywhere for 3 to 15 years. I'm not saying walking is not allowed. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to, even by your own child or your spouse. You're being interrogated, doing very, very harsh Scientology interrogation on their machine at night. And then you're doing 10 to 15, probably 15 hours of hard labor a day, depending on the time, 12 to 15 hours of hard labor a day. 3 to 5 hours of indoctrination a day, and just you're eating slop, and you're living in. My mother was on this, and she was explaining to me that she was bad, and she had to do this to redeem herself, and that Hubbard, the great benevolent Mr. Hubbard, had created a system where someone bad like her could redeem themselves with and again, I didn't see my mother for years at this time.
Seems like almost a limitless capacity they had for inhumanity and for cruelty.
And you believe that it's humane the whole time. I mean, at 16 years old, my brother got sent to that hard labor camp for having for sleeping with his girlfriend. And he spent from 16 to 23 on that hard labor camp. 7 years for doing what teenagers do, having sex with his girlfriend. And he was never the same after it. And he's still involved in the movement. But the other thing is the indoctrination that started when I was 4 years old. I mean, human emotion is frowned upon. If we got upset as kids, we would be told to knock off the human emotion and reaction, they would call it, to stop dramatizing. We were faking. We were, if we were crying, it was because we were doing something that was we were stimulated, or I'm trying to find the word.
Yeah, they have all the
triggered.
special.
Yeah. I try not to use the words triggered by a past life or something. So human emotion was, you learn to, if you hurt yourself or you're sick, you're labeled a potential trouble source. You have a stigma, a scarlet letter put on you. So you learn to hide your illnesses. I probably had about 5 near-death experiences and I'm hiding any sort of, if I hurt myself or I'm sick, you're trying to hide it because you're given this label of a potential trouble source, which is like a scarlet letter that you're bad. So
it's like everything that happens to you, you created. It's your fault.
100%. There's a term in this thing called pulled it in. And anything bad that happens to you, you pulled it in based on something bad you did in a previous life or in this life. So you get highly stigmatized and outcast and be looked at as bad or evil if you're sick or injured. So you learn. And so I had probably 3 to 4 near-death experiences from medical neglect. And the only reason I didn't die is because we went on a trip to visit my relatives in New York. And for the first time ever in 5 years, they looked at my body, and then I would be rushed to the emergency room.
Yeah, tell that story. That's because in your story, Child X, you're thinking, okay, well, this is the moment where some sanity will rule the day. Like these people coming in from the outside, they're going to take hold and rescue this guy. And sort of happens, sort of doesn't happen, though, more than anything. Tell the story about you being rushed to the hospital.
Well, there's a couple of those stories. I mean, one of them was when I was 4 or 5, we went on a trip to New York. My grandmother, who was very warm, put me in the tub in her house in Westchester County, looked down at me and screamed for my stepfather, where I was rushed to the emergency room with an infection in my lower extremities that could have gone septic and killed me. The only reason it wasn't found out about was because no one was looking at my body in these dormitories. And I was so numb from the abandonment of not having parents. I didn't, pain was just a normal thing that I felt. So I didn't know to say that something was wrong. A few years later, I was back in New York, and I said I couldn't hear, but it was going in and out. My mother told my grandmother I was faking. They insisted on going to see a doctor that had interned under my grandfather when my mother was a kid in a neighboring town in New Rochelle, New York. We went to New Rochelle. The doctor looked at my ears. Very kind Black woman named Lucille Gunning. She turned to my grandmother and said, "You're going to be taking Jamie into the city, and you're going to talk to this doctor." And I went into surgery the next morning, and they weren't sure if they were going to be able to save my hearing. I had my tonsils taken out, my adenoids removed, and they weren't sure they were going to save my hearing. So medical neglect is a huge part of the story.
Jamie, your mom and your family, it's against the backdrop of all of that this happens. And it's the part of it that I think a lot of us who hear the story, read the story, are perplexed by. It's just confusing because she's not from some background of squalor and the horror show that was about to, befall your upbringing. She's not, is she? I mean, she's her background and your family background. What was it?
On my mom's side, the story with my father is very complicated. So I urge you to read the book because it's kind of unbelievable. All right. It's right out of Star Wars. But on my mom's side, my mother came from a prominent Black family. My grandparents met in medical school, a school called Meharry Medical School, which it's a famous Black medical school outside of Nashville. My grandfather was a doctor, a very, very prominent and successful doctor. He was a flight surgeon during World War II, and he was stationed in Burma, and he was a famed Tuskegee Airman. And so I think that if he had not died, so what's incredible about my family is I can trace my family, that side of my family, back all the way back to 1865, before since to slavery, and between 1865 and 1940, 75 years. What my family accomplished is remarkable. It's an incredible family of physicians, Black physicians, and Black wealth. And what's incredible is that my grandfather's a Tuskegee Airman. He was born a millionaire. And when he was at Black Medical School in Nashville, he used to go work as a porter at Nashville train stations so that the other kids at the medical school didn't know he was rich. And the day he finished medical school, he left the South and bought a huge house in Connecticut in a Jewish neighborhood across the street from Sidney Poitier. And so the question is, after all of this success, the grandson is born a slave. How does that happen? And that's what my book, Child X, is about. And it's different than any book that's ever been written on this subject, because it's not this happened to me and that happened to me. It's a history book that has a context of my life. And the book is called Child X, because the idea is that my life was marked for labor and my future was marked before I was born by this science fiction naval group that I've been humiliated about most of my life. I never thought I would be here talking to someone like you, open about it, because there was just so much pain and literacy connected to it. What's so startling about my story is that I escape at 19, semi-literate. I can't write. I don't know how to use a comma. I don't know how to use a period. I can read at a high level from studying the doctrine. I don't know math above kindergarten. And I get with this relative says to me, you can stay at my house if you're in school, beauty school, trade school, anything. So I'm just studying for rent in New York. And I start doing remedial classes at a Westchester Community College with no ambition other than I need someplace to live. And this person says, if I'm studying, I can stay at their house. 5.5 years later, I graduate from the London School of Economics, which is one of the most lofty, or I don't know what
prestigious.
The word, prestigious,
yeah,
or
incredibly prestigious.
Yeah, prestigious and rarefied schools in the world. So, how did I do that is a huge part of this story, because I was illiterate. I mean, I could read at a high level from studying the doctrine, but I had no expressive, I couldn't write, and I couldn't even do the most basic
Why do
math.
they discourage writing? And that is to say, why don't they teach you how to write if they've taught you how to read?
Well, they don't technically teach you how to write. They don't technically not teach you how to write. Lafayette Hubbard was kind of really down on formal education. He said that all people needed was reading, the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. Okay. So the only way I can describe it is all of the resources in that group in Scientology are towards making money, and children were looked at as kind of useless eaters that weren't going to be valuable for 10, 11 years. So how can we spend the least amount of resources with them? They had so-called schools with fancy names. I don't use any of the language in the book. They had a school that we went to called the Apollo Training Academy. It was an out-of-code, dangerous office building with a dirt patch in the back exposed to the sun. So that's one of the things I do in the book, is I don't use any of the terms. And it's really an incredible story of, I wrote this, I didn't write this story. I did feel the need to honor the kids that I grew up with, because their story's never been told. The story of the lost generation, the children of Scientology, has never been told. And I had to honor them because they would be reading this book. But they were the second, I wrote it, I wasn't really writing it for them. I was writing it for anyone that is in a place in life in the world where they absolutely can't come back. They're done. It's over. You're too far gone. And you can still come back. That's the story of Child X.
I mean, it's so insanely compelling. I guess I was focusing on your mom for a heartbeat, because
we can go back
because
there,
she's surrendering her child to what she knows are squalorous conditions and oppressive conditions, and it just seems so counter to a maternal instinct and just knowing what's right and wrong, you know. And,
I'd love
and
to.
the-
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, no, I was just going to say the kind of indoctrination that she must have already been going through must have been so intense that just, you know, those things just didn't factor in.
I think it's also a product of the time. You know, you have a person that is, you know, a child of the 60s. You know, she's coming of age in the late 60s, early of 70s, you know, and she's, this was a very terrifying time to be alive in America. You had all these assassinations, you know, Medgar Evers, RFK, JFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I mean, they were just, and then you had the Vietnam War with 50,000 people, Americans dead. I mean, just that's Americans. And then you had the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, when I was a kid going to school in LA, we did these nuclear missile drills where we were going to have to go under. This was a time where the late 60s and the 70s in America, where we really thought the world might burn up in nuclear fire. I cover this extensively in the book. It's the context of how our parents were thinking. There were, it wasn't just Scientology. Our parents were joining thousands of these alternative religious groups and communes across the country. And my mother, you know, as much as she brutalized me, I explained her life. When she got a rare form of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, that could have killed her at 11 or 12. And then her father, she was a daddy's girl, dies when she's young. And I just think that this shattered her. And then you have the context of the 60s. So it created a perfect storm for her to find a way to cope with existence, like so many other people of that time. And that is exhaustively talked about in the context of Child X, because I want people to understand how this entire lost generation in the context of Scientology has never been spoken about, and why. I want people to understand how this particular tale of Scientology that's told in Child X has never been told. This particular tale of the children of Scientology's paramilitary naval organization has never been told. And I got to the point where I thought, if I don't tell it, maybe it will never get told. And that I've lost a lot of friends, and I felt like I had to put my shame aside and tell the story.
First, I love that you contextualize it and you build a framework around it, because it was in that crucible of everything going on in the 60s. I mean, America's cities were on fire, literally. There was a civil rights movement, a roiling sense that anything was wrong. You say it so well, I think. You know, Vietnam War, you throw in that as well. And so there's a sense that you're looking for some mooring, you're looking for some security, you're looking for a community. And it was a time of openness, of, you know, the flower children, make love, not war, et cetera. So all of these different things were cropping up. I think you're so smart to, you know, paint it against that backdrop. We've heard so much in the way of these horror stories. The Leah Remini show brought it to television, and the as I mentioned before, Going Clear, et cetera. But wow, your work seems kind of uniquely targeted at explaining how there was the explosion of this consciousness of this church, of how they gained so much momentum. And it's fascinating to me. It's also the specifics of Scientology. The teachings are fascinating as well, because those who are in the church through the decades, 80s, 90s, and up to today, they swear by the teachings of Scientology. I guess that's the religiosity of it, maybe, because you get a religious fervor oftentimes with many, many different kinds of sects.
Yeah.
SCTS, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I knew Leah Remini for when I was younger. We share one of my best friends is one of her best friends. And what makes my story a little different, but not different from Leah and maybe others, I knew Danny Masterson, right? What makes my story different than them is that I was born as an infant. I was immediately delivered into their paramilitary nursery. And these paramilitary nurseries were mirrored around the world, in Central Florida, in Sydney, in South Africa, in Los Angeles. I mean, the ones in South Africa and say Mexico City were smaller, but the ones in Copenhagen and Southern England, these were significant. Neil Gaiman would have been the generation before me. People don't know this. I mean, his father was not only the head spokesperson for all of Scientology for many years, a close confidant of Hubbard, but was at one point the head of Scientology's secret police, the Guardian's office, which we know today is the Office of Special Affairs. And I know there's been all this controversy with Neil, but I also understand. I don't want to justify anything that he's done, but I would say if you had sadism reaped upon you, you might be a bit of a sadist. And I mean, Neil, people don't know this. Before Neil Gaiman was Neil Gaiman, he was the head, he was a member of this paramilitary organization running the organization in Birmingham, right? Not right before he became started to have a career as a writer. So this story of what happened to these kids of the paramilitary organization on 4 continents has never been told. And these kids are starting to age out. And I felt like if I didn't tell it, it was never, and I don't really have an axe to grind either with these guys. I just felt that I got to a point where the story needed to be told, and my publisher convinced me that it could be a book that would be redemptive for the human spirit, for human beings as a whole. I didn't write it as a tell-all about Scientology. I wrote it because what my grandparents achieved in 75 years after slavery was astonishing. As my grandfather was this esteemed surgeon with generational wealth, and then his grandson was born a slave. How does that happen?
Your story is amazing, though, because you kind of repeated the same course. Born a slave, end up at the London School of Economics. You were, again, you could only read, not write, and you had to sustain a life through the brutality, through the neglect. I mean, it's a pretty, it's like a Charles Dickens, meets a horror movie kind of write-up. It's like, I mean, the pitch is almost too grim for you, for you to sit in a room and do it. But what I'm saying is simply, I see the parallel, oddly, between your grandfather and yourself. And it's interesting to know the motivation, which is, as you say, was just to get the story out. So have you heard from others who grew up in these kinds of withering conditions?
I got to tell you, Mark, it was so funny that you asked that, because that was the terrifying thing about writing this book. I decided not to use any of his language, Hubbard's language, and to strip it bare so you could read it for what it was, which has never been done in a book like this. And I was terrified. I felt like they were the secondary, like I said, people I was writing for, the kids I grew up with. I wanted to tell their story. But I was terrified all the way through. Terrified, I don't know if the right word. I felt a great weight to get it right, because I thought if I get something wrong, these kids are going to call bullshit. Can I say BS on your show? Okay. Sure. Okay. And so that was a very strong weight. And what was so powerful about this Daily Mail article that came out a week ago is what the institution admits to is astonishing. It's just what they admit to. There's one thing they did to me where when I was 18, 19 years old, I was trafficked on their free winds, on their cruise ship in the Caribbean. And it's a harrowing story. And their denial, they don't even deny it. The worst thing they say is their doctor has no records of me being there and being in the infirmary, because I was put through this thing at 18, 19 years old in the engine room that was pretty harrowing. And I ended up in the infirmary, and they said their doctor has no record. There was no doctor there. So that's quite funny that they said that.
Yeah, of all the ways to have a problem with that story, that was the one that they chose out, the one specific that they had an issue with.
Yeah. Let's see if I meant. So so the kids that I grew up with, that was the part that I really felt a weight to get it right. And that's been one of the most powerful things, is these kids that I was there with at the baby factory in downtown LA, at the Melrose building, in these kind of below animalistic, below third world conditions. These kids are writing me, and they're saying things to me. One girl that I was there with, in fact, that's really, really this friend that I share with Leah Remini, we share a best friend, wrote me, who's been took 7 years to put herself through night school at UCLA, and graduated college. She's had a successful life. She's one of the very, very rare ones. And she wrote me when she was reading the book and said, I went to see her when I was in LA doing some media, and I gave her a book, and she seemed really cynical about it, and like she wasn't going to read it. And then she started writing me. She picked it up, and she started writing me. And she said, and she finished it very quickly. And she just said, no one in my life could ever know me because of what we went through. Not my children, not my closest friends, not my boyfriend. And now I can hand them your book, and they can finally know me. And so the kids that have reached out to me that I was in these dormitories with, that have told me that their story's been told for the first time, the weight off me for that, the weight I felt has been, it makes me emotional to talk about.
Of course. I mean, that's a tremendous accomplishment. That may be the greatest thing that can be achieved in getting the story told the way you told it. Look, I want to let everybody know that there are links under this video to this book, Child X, but also Jamie's a prolific author, and there are other books, his other works. You can find them also under this video. There are links there. I know you have a graphic novel coming out, I think, in the fall. I'd love for you to come back. And you don't always have to come back to, to mention a book or to promote a book. You're a friend of the show, and we share some overlap in our personal life too. And I just adore all of that. So you've got a friendly port here anytime, man. Thank you.
Thank you. And, I just, at the end here, I would just urge people to check out Child X. If you want to support me, I'm going to shamelessly say, read this, get this thing, and see. I really feel like if people understood what had happened to the kids, there would be more justice in the world. So read what happened to us, and we'll change this.
I do want to, on this, because I'd love to have you come back and even revisit aspects of Child X, because we've only done a broad stroke here, I know. But do me this favor, and in as best you are able, tell me what's happened to that program to which you've referred in Scientology, those other kids, that militaristic setup. Sea Org still exists, I know. I mean, can you just like do a reducto sort of on what's still around?
Yeah, in the mid '80s, when I was a kid, they banned having babies in Scientology's paramilitary because they were turning out like us, like me. And so when I went off to Oregon for a couple of years, which saved my life. And then when I came back, all my friends over the age of 14 were living in the street around the Big Blue Building in Hollywood. And that, which is covered in the book. I mean, it was right out of it's right out of like Godard's Breathless and a sci-fi experience in the middle of Hollywood.
They created a generation of this.
And all these kids were living on, they're trying to stay close to their parents, so they're 15 years old living in apartments right next to the Big Blue Building in Hollywood. It was completely an incredible scene, and a lot of them got involved. There was an Armenian kid that ran a market in Hannon's who was DJ'd all of our parties. It turned out that he was a kind of he had all this equipment. He had a brand new Corvette and brand new GSXR 1100 and 25,000. He DJ'd all our parties. We grew up in this kind of Mexican Armenian neighborhood, and this kid was hiring some of the local Scientology kids that had been kicked out to commit. They were stealing motorcycles. I mean, there was like this weird mix of like sci-fi, cult, and it's something. That scene has never been told in a book, and it's in Child X, and it's quite something.
Again, the link to it is under this video, Child X. Jamie, thank you. Come back again and let's talk more about this book. There's a lot here, and there are a lot of details, and I'd like to even catch up more on some of that, which we've only had a chance to kind of sort of broad stroke here. So thanks again.
I would love it. I'd love to come back in, the next couple of months or as time allows. And
you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're a busy guy too. I know you're everywhere, and it's terrific. I mean, your story alone is worth a good long conversation and a look, and you tell that story in Child X, and you also fill in a lot of other blanks.
Yeah, people want to know, how do you not go to school your entire life and then graduate from the London School of Economics? Well, I explain how I did it. So it's an incredible. It's the point of this book is not for ex-Scientologists; it's for the human race. And the point of this book is, you can be in the deepest hole of human existence and think that there is no way out and still get out. That's why I wrote it.
Jimmy Mustard, Child X. Thanks, pal. Appreciate you coming through.
Thank you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Great interview with Mark and Jamie Mustard. You'll find the link to Jamie's book in the chat. It's also in the show description, and really recommend it. Wow, that's crazy. Earlier in the show, Tony, we talked about Trump's visit to the Bible Museum and his complete disregard for domestic violence and the safety of women. But it turns out that's not the only thing that happened at the Bible Museum.
Oh, no.
Trump, I know. He's on a real roll, Tony.
What did he do today?
Well, in addition to completely disregarding women and seemingly advocating for domestic violence and considering it not a real crime, Trump announced plans to reintroduce prayer in public schools. Yay! No. He said he has plans to have the Department of Education issue new guidance protecting prayer in public schools. Do we not have a separation of church and state? Are they just going to trample on the Constitution until there's nothing left? He makes this appearance this morning at the Museum of the Bible. And this, by the way, this museum was founded by the family, the Green family, who owns Hobby Lobby. So big surprise there. He didn't provide a timeline about this new prayer in schools thing, but he said this: for most of our country's history, the Bible was found in every classroom in the nation. Yet, in many schools today, students are indoctrinated with anti-religious propaganda. We know the Supreme Court banned most prayer in public schools in a number of decisions in the 1960s. They've been pushing, though, to get this prayer in school. We've already seen
from Pizza Hut are just $5 each till 5 p.m.
Oh, I don't know what that is, but we do know. I'd rather listen to a commercial than prayer in school. It is legal for people to pray in school to themselves or in groups if they want to pray before a game or pray before a test or pray whenever they want to pray before lunch. You can pray in school. What is not legal is to have the teacher or the school force you to pray or lead prayer. So if it's your individual desire to pray, to close your eyes and, talk to God whenever you want, you can do that. But the school can't teach it because in this country, we have a separation of church and state. But in the last year or so, there have been states that have decided that the 10 Commandments need to be posted in our classrooms. And now apparently Trump wants the Bible in every classroom. He said for most of our country's history, there was a Bible in every classroom. Maybe back in the day of the one-room schoolhouse, the only time I ever remember a Bible in the classroom was during a lesson on comparative religion, where you had a section on the Bible, you had a section on the Quran, you had a section on the Torah, whatever religion you could think of, they would present in sections, here's this religion, here's that religion. But there wasn't just a Bible in class all the time. I don't ever remember that. But apparently that will be the new way under the Trump administration. And if it's taken to the Supreme Court, I have zero faith that they will uphold the Constitution, because that's the new America. Let's do a little bit of news. Tony, what do you say? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll play it now. Give me a minute.
We'll do it. It's the news on the Mark
Another
Thompson
tab. Give you a minute.
It's coming. And I can't do it without the big fancy intro. Here it is. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The Supreme Court is giving ICE officers more flexibility during operation tactics in the Los Angeles area. Today, the Supreme Court blocked a federal judge's ruling that restricts federal officers from stopping people based on their race or ethnicity, or if they speak Spanish. The decision in response to an emergency request filed by the Trump administration. It puts on hold the ruling from a Biden-appointed judge. So now ICE agents will be able to stop you based on your appearance, your location, or the language that you are speaking. A federal appeals court is denying President Trump's bid to overturn a verdict that ordered him to pay more than $83 million for defaming writer E. Jean Carroll. The judges found Trump failed to identify any grounds that would warrant reconsidering the prior holding on presidential immunity. It comes after lawyers for the president had signaled last week that they'll be asking the Supreme Court to overturn a separate civil lawsuit filed by Carroll against Trump, in which she was given $5 million. The president doubling down on his vow to clean up Chicago, despite brushing off questions about going to war with the city as fake news. His comments following weekend protests against his repeated threats to send federal troops, including a social media post warning Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War. Trump is also saying he's considering deploying troops to New Orleans, while Homeland Security is confirming federal immigration raids are already underway in the city of Boston. South Korea's foreign minister is in the United States today to help bring home about 300 Korean workers arrested last week working illegally at a Georgia Hyundai plant. The plan so far is to fly the workers, mostly employed by subcontractors, home on chartered flights. House lawmakers say they have enough votes to force the release of the Justice Department files on Jeffrey Epstein. Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna telling ABC's This Week they are confident their petition will bring the measure to a vote, despite potential Senate hurdles of the Justice Department redactions. Thursday, we mark 24 years since the September 11th attacks, and new reporting now shows that nearly 50,000 people, 50,000, have been diagnosed with 9/11 related cancers, many of them first responders. That according to the World Trade Center Health Program. The number has surged more than 140% in the last 5 years, with toxins from Ground Zero and Fresh Kill landfills being blamed for that. The city of San Jose is being hailed as the nation's safest major city. A report by financial tech company Smart Asset ranked San Jose the safest out of the 50 largest U.S. cities. They used statistics from the FBI's 2023 Uniform Crime Reporting Database and the 2025 County Health Rankings. They looked at violent crimes, traffic fatalities per 100,000 residents, median income, and more. San Jose has among the lowest rates in all categories, with the third fewest violent crimes and the fifth fewest property crimes. Los Angeles ranking second, and Fort Worth, Texas ranking third as far as the major safe cities. There is a new study, and this is a weird story. A new study says couples usually share mental health diagnoses. The study for the journal Nature Human Behavior looked at data from about 15 million people and was done with researchers from Denmark, Taiwan, and the United States. The researchers used national registries to find out how many couples share psychiatric diagnoses. The researchers found that when one partner was diagnosed with any of the 9 disorders studied, the other was likely to be diagnosed with one as well. Likely the same diagnosis. The psychiatric and population experts behind the study focused on 9 mental health disorders: anorexia nervosa, anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, bipolar, depression, obsessive compulsive, schizophrenia, and substance use disorder. So the substance use makes sense to me because if you're in the same house, maybe you've got drugs going on, one person's doing drugs and pressuring the other person to, what have you. Maybe even eating disorders, because if you're in the same house, maybe you're eating the same meals or not eating or whatever it may be. But those other things like schizophrenia, autism, that seems maybe a little more difficult to understand the why behind that, but interesting. There is an Italian teenager who was known as God's influencer, who is now the first millennial saint. Thousands of young people filled St. Peter's Square in the Vatican this morning to witness the ceremony presided over by Pope Leo XIV. They held up pictures of Carlo Acutis. He died in 2006 of leukemia at age 15. He becomes again the first millennial saint. And this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I am so fortunate to have a cup full of the vanilla tea. The Coffee, though, beloved in my house, especially, you see here, it is the Lion's Mane coffee. It's called the Clarity Blend. My husband is loving that coffee. They make tea that has mushrooms in it as well, that's supposed to improve your mental outlook and keep your mind sharp. That's the turmeric chai tea, also very good. It's got a little spice to it. It's delicious as iced tea or hot tea. So good. I'm loving the vanilla tea. They have mango tea that's delicious. Mark loves the Ocotillo espresso. But the thing is, on the website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, they have amazing tasting notes. So you can see specifically what you're buying and what fits your taste before you even click it into your cart. Once you get to the cart, please enter our exclusive Mark Thompson Show discount code, MARK-T, no spaces there. MARK-T at checkout will get you 10% off of your order at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And I really believe once you try it, you'll think, what have I been doing? What am I buying? And why am I not buying this? It seems to last a long time for me. And so it's, even though the prices may seem high, the quality is amazing and it lasts forever. So CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Please check it out and see what they have to offer. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
There is one thing I haven't mentioned, Tony, and we didn't get to it last week, but I really want to make sure that we do. You know, last week we talked about, I don't know if you were here for this, but after the whole RFK Jr. debacle, we talked about the West Coast states making our own health alliance. So Washington, Oregon, California working together as a health alliance. But what we hadn't mentioned is that Massachusetts is becoming the first state to impose its own vaccine coverage rules. They are requiring health insurers to operate in the state of Massachusetts to cover vaccines recommended by the state's Department of Public Health. They are the first state to mandate insurance coverage of vaccines, even if the federal government stops requiring it. So Massachusetts becoming the first state to go solo on this. Yeah, the first state to impose their own vaccine coverage rules. The health insurers operating in Massachusetts must cover vaccines recommended by the CDC at no extra cost to patients, even though RFK Jr. has indicated he wants to roll back some federal vaccine recommendations. This is supported, this directive, by the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Massachusetts Association of Health Plans, the National Health Insurance Trade Group, says their members will be continuing to cover vaccines for this year's respiratory season. So good news for people in Massachusetts. You wonder why every state doesn't do that. You know, you have the state of Florida who's trying to now drop childhood vaccinations for kids going into school, the requirements for them. And then you have a state like Massachusetts who is like, you know what? No, we're going to protect our citizens. I hope more states will look at what Massachusetts is doing and say, you know what? That makes a lot of sense here. We have some people to thank, and that includes Richard Delamater, who threw in a couple bucks today. Is that coat would look great with the tie-dye? Oh, he's talking about Mark's coat from earlier. Yeah. Jim Slayton, maybe the people can get a QR code tattoo to aid in proof of citizenship they can scan, or has this been done before? Yeah, that's been done before. And it seems, I get your reference. It seems like that's where we're going back to, isn't it? Everyone carry your papers. Here we go. Wes throwing down 5, kind of like in World War II when the German officers would search out people in schools, churches, workplaces, and finally private homes. I'm telling you, this is not a place the United States should go. And I don't know how we get out of this. I don't know how we get out of it. Uncle Scrooge with 5, we need to start calling these tactics what they are. Nazi tactics, says Uncle Scrooge. Luis with 5, welcome back and thank you, Oasis, for 2 spectacular sold-out shows at the Rose Bowl this weekend. Thank you for being an Oasis from TT and his BS. I'm glad you had fun at the concert. I was looking over the weekend, Tony,
Mm.
at someone who had posted concert footage from the Sphere in Las Vegas where
Oh, right on.
the Eagles were performing.
Oh.
And the pictures are incredible.
It looks intense in there.
It really does look intense in there. I mean, what an experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, pretty cool. Well, we have made it. We have the after party live next. I hope you'll join for that show. And totally non-political, totally different show than this one. Mark will be back tomorrow. And I thank you for joining us. Thanks, Tony, for all the pictures and great work today. I appreciate you.
I wasn't great today, but it was good enough.
It was.
And I will link to the after party in chat right now.
Mars, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you everyone for contributing to the show. Please click the like button on the way out. If you haven't subscribed to the Mark Thompson Show, subscribe. We have great guests all through the rest of this week, and we'd love to keep you coming back here because we love having you. Welcome. All right, for now, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.